Hi, my name is Jonathan Hicks, and this evening I'm joined by
Mark.
Steve, and we just finished playing Merchant's Cove, which is quite an unusual game because every player board is completely different. We all take different characters. So Mark in this case is the Alchemist, I think. Steve was the Chronomancer. You see we get a little figure here as well that sort of represents you taking actions on the board. And I was the Blacksmith. And essentially we're all producing goods. You see I have a little stand here to represent, you see the blacksmith is producing swords and gauntlets, this looks like, and there's a helmet. But the Chronomancer is going back in time and grabbing artifacts from the past, I think. And the Alchemist, of course, is brewing potions. And we all manufacture our goods in different ways. Now, I'm not going to go through all the rules here, but just to give you a brief overview, essentially the blacksmith is trying to power up potions. So he kind of rolls the dice over here, and then decides where to put them. It's this kind of dice selection thing. So he's putting dice in here, like this maybe, and this would make a large good. You see there are large goods, the big ones, and small goods. So in these areas, he's trying to get high numbers on the dice. If he gets 10 or more, he could make a large red or green good. 12 or more lets you make a blue or yellow one. Because it's a yellow dice here, it makes yellow. But you want small numbers. I haven't really got small numbers, but if I put this here, then I'm trying to get 8 or less for red or green, etc. here. So on these sides, I'm making the small goods with low dice. On these sides, I'm making the big goods with big dice. And I put them there. It's sort of action. You take an action by going in a spot. So I put the spot here, and then I can move the dice to there. When I put the dice on this side, I have to go in this spot. And each time you take one of these actions, it costs you time. So time is an important resource in this game. And it's like the patchwork system, if you're familiar with that. So whoever's turn it is the person on top. And they kind of advance a certain number of spaces. If they use 2 time, they go 2 spaces. And the next person behind them then would carry on. And so if you go past somebody, it might be it's your turn and you go a certain number of spaces. But if you're still at the back or you're on top, you get to go again. And then after they move, it would be Orange's turn because they're at the back. And if Orange's goes 2, it'll be Black's turn again. And you keep, whoever's at the back keeps, you sort of leapfrog over each other by spending time to do the different actions. Once I've filled up my furnaces, I take the big sort of smelting action here, which costs me 2 time. And then I get to convert these and sort of remove the dice. And I get the various goods and stick them on my for sale shelf here. So that's kind of how the blacksmith works. The Chronomancer, thanks Steve, has this sort of clockwise motion he takes around his board here. So he goes on here like this and produces a large red good, you see, and he has this little assistant that always goes ahead of him. And the assistant's very helpful because when he goes on this spot here, he gets these tokens, which you can spend to reduce the time cost of an action. So if I go with the Chronomancer onto this space here, this would normally cost me 2 time, but I could spend one of these and put it back on here, and now it only costs me 1 time. So you're reducing how much it costs. Obviously, the slower you move around, if it doesn't cost you much time, the more actions you get to take. When we get to the 12 at the end here, that signals the end of the day, and you can't manufacture any more of your goods. So you can see he's making on this space large green goods, small red goods, etc. And they keep sort of moving clockwise around here, taking the various actions. But crucially, when he goes onto this spot here, he can take a new tile, which might offer different options, or sometimes it's a reduced cost. So this cost on this tile is only 1 time, whereas here this is 2, for example. And you sort of slide them down, so you're changing your board and giving yourself different actions with the Chronomancer. So more or less that's how he works. Finally then is the Alchemist, and the Alchemist is playing Potion Explosion, if you're familiar with that. So he kind of goes onto a spot like this and picks a certain colour of good. So if he went for yellow, then he can take all the yellow ones out of that row, like this one, and anything that drops into it, so another one's dropped in as well, he gets to take that as well, and then he puts it in these cauldrons at the bottom. So if you manage to get 2 of the same colour in here, that would make a small good. If you have another one of any kind of colour at all, so like this green one, even if you want in there, that would make a large yellow good. So that's kind of, there's icons at the bottom that show you how to make small or large goods. The black ones are wild though, so they're quite helpful. If I were to take this action here now and get these 2 red ones, the black one counts as red, so when I remove it, I also get to take the black one, and I could fill up and make a large red good by going in this one. So he then takes the sort of brew action here for 1 time and converts these into the various potions you see on the stand. The black ones, though, kind of gradually build up into this toxic waste vat and produce corruption. Now, I've not really talked about corruption, but corruption is quite important in the game. Each board has its own way of producing corruption. So in my case, if my numbers aren't quite high enough or aren't quite low enough, you can see I'm going to be taking corruption. You draw off a deck here, and it's kind of a bit random. So this, that's quite bad. That's 3 corruption, that would be. But some of them are only 1 corruption. And at the end of the game, you're going to be losing points, essentially, for having lots of corruption. Now, why are you manufacturing all of these goods? Well, having manufactured the goods, the other thing that happens is, as you move around the time board, you're pulling meeples out of a bag. Steve, do you want to demonstrate? So you pull the meeple out of a bag and you add it to these boats that are waiting. Now, if you fill up a boat and put the last meeple on it, then it will dock, and you decide which sort of pier to go on out of the 2 options. And then all those people unload onto that pier. So by doing this, you're kind of influencing the different colours of meeples that are appearing on the different piers. This matters because when it comes to selling your goods, only green meeples will buy green goods. So if there are no green meeples, you can't sell your green goods. That's quite an important consideration. But also on this pier, you can only sell large goods to these people. That's all they want. On this pier, they only want small goods. On this pier, they'll take anything. It's the black market, but you'll get a corruption. There's a corruption symbol there if you sell at that one. Once you fill up both the piers, any meeples that are in a boat that didn't manage to stop, dock, they'll go in these faction halls, as they're called. Now these are important because it's also possible to reveal these faction symbols in a couple of different ways. Essentially, at the end of each round, you get to score the number of meeples in here if you have unlocked, if you like, your red, if you can just about see that faction icon. The blacksmiths have a way of getting extra dice, but that also unlocks the matching coloured faction icon. Each of the boards has a way of getting these sponsorships, as they're called, which is where you get money for the amount of people in there. I keep calling it victory points, but essentially it's money. Once all the people have docked there, you sell all your goods. So if I've got 2 large green goods, I can sell them here for the people. And essentially you multiply the value of the goods by the number of meeples. So it's 2 green meeples here. So it's 2 times, my large goods are worth 6 each. So that's 12 in total. 2 12s would mean 24. So for selling these 2 large goods to these 2 green people, I get 24 coins, if you like. It's just tracked around the edge of the points, around the edge of the board here. Most money wins at the end of the game, so that's all you really care about. You're just trying to get as much money as you can. Now, briefly, before we have some thoughts, a couple of other things. You can also acquire staff. Everybody has this staff board, as it's called. One of the actions on your board lets you buy the people from here, which is important for a couple of things. They have an instant action. You can see this guy will get rid of corruption for you. This guy will move people off the boat onto one of the ports. And you add it to your staff board. And another action then will allow you to trigger your staff board, which means you get to do all these extra actions along the bottom, which often let you do other things on here, but a bit more cheaply, particularly if you manage to power it up. And at the end of the game, each of these circles at the top left here is a sponsorship thing. So you're getting money according to the number of meeples in the various faction halls. So you can see I've got 3 yellow circles, 3 times 3 people here will get me 9 coins at the end of the game for that. So yeah, most coins wins at the end. What do you think?
Well, it's an interesting concept of mini games in a larger game. Very distinct though for something like Root, etc. These are very definitely feel like mini games. I think I've only played one of the mini games. They're definitely all different. Some I think are more luck dependent than others, and in a game that is heavily affected by somebody's random draw out of a bag, that massively affects the game of ultimately the meeples going onto the boats, mean that I suspect if you get done in, you can get really done in, and if it falls in place for you, it falls in place for you. Despite what Jonathan's saying, actually I was playing the blacksmith, and the blacksmith was the easiest to play because I think I had, as long as I could delay, if I was going later to see some of the meeples come out, it meant that I could just start targeting my dice in the areas that they were most likely to score highest. While someone like Steve is very much limited to the tiles he's got on his board, and he can't quickly refresh them to change them over. And this is a game of stuff falling down. So you're essentially affected by how high they are up the stack. Yeah. I could also see that the nature of the boats being too cutthroat for some people, especially in something about scoring the highest points, because if you had 4 players, you're like, okay, I hope to get that in there. I really need that to score anything. And then 3 players all put down 3 meeples, move a ship in, you're done in. It's an interesting idea. I didn't find playing the blacksmith super interesting. The mini game was just a little bit too simple to be part, so that it works, so that you can teach other players all at the same time. Assume you went to this with 4 players who've never played before, or and 3 others, something like that. You're going to have to teach those mini games to each of the people individually, as well as the main game, is what happened here. So they can't be too overly complex, and it meant that they were just a little bit too lightweight and didn't really add up too much for me. I'm not even sure I'd say I'd want to play one of the other mini games, so I think that's quite a hard pass.
Okay, Steve?
Mark's not wrong with anything he says. I think there is luck in the game, and I think if you play your board badly and other people play it well, they will beat you. So the luck it's not that swingy. It's not like if I play poorly, it doesn't matter how lucky I get, I'm not going to win. Yeah, if I play well and everyone else plays poorly, I'm probably going to win, regardless of how unlucky I get. However, we were playing 3 players, and so what happens is you've got a bit of control over when you time to take the meeples out. You might be able, especially mine, I had some time actions. I could start delaying my actions. If I spend my time token, I don't move my chip around the board, and I don't put meeple out there because I don't want to do it. But what will happen is I'll pull a yellow meeple out, and I'll say, well, this is good because I've got a yellow good I want to sell. But if I put the yellow meeple in a boat, I want to get to the large dock, the next person realises I'm going to do that, puts another meeple behind it, sends it to the other dock, and I don't get to do it. So what essentially happens is I make a green good. Mark can see I'm going to make a green good, so he'll send the green guy to the small things because Mark's flexibility is much better than mine on the blacksmith's board. He can make 2 green goods in one turn, and then we kind of teamed up and made some green goods, and then there was one round where 4 red guys went to the large red thing, and I'd made a large thing, and Mark could see what I was doing, so he made some large red goods, and we both conspired to send the boats to the large dock. And the fact that what benefits me benefits Mark, and we kind of had one really big scoring round in the middle. So to that extent, I'm not sure. I think the boards are different in terms of how lucky they are. So I have to kind of pre-set out my board. I have to add tiles to the columns, tiles that improve the existing tiles I had in the start. I had a very slow first round. All my tiles took like 2 time to do any action. But then when I'd gone through one pass and I can improve one tile, and I went another pass and improved another tile. But I'm improving tiles, not knowing what colour meeples are going to be on next round's boats. Because when I'm adding a tile, it's a few turns before I'm going to that action. By the time I take that action, it's the next turn. So do I add the tile that makes large yellow goods or small blue goods? I don't know what's going to come out next turn. And even if I know what's coming out, I don't know where they're going to go. So I was benefited by Mark kind of copying the stuff I made and both of us putting it together, but I can see that I would get frustrated if I kind of tailor my board to make red goods and then no one put any red meeples into the docks I wasn't wanting to sell or to send them towards the corruption. So I don't know. Again, I'm with Mark. I think the interesting thing about this game is the individual puzzles you've got on your player boards, and I was looking at Mark thinking, well, he's just doing that action, then this action, then that action, and this action. Once he'd spent his first round and a half powering up his thing, he was just doing one action and another, and one and another, and that's not very interesting to play. Jonathan got done in a bit by the look of the draw, so again, would I feel frustrated if I'm playing a game which lasts 90 minutes or something, where I'm pulling marbles out of a bag? You have options to mitigate it, but you can't mitigate it fully. Whereas on this board, there's no luck on the board itself. I can pre-plan my whole round. The look on this one is setting up my board for future rounds. I don't know how to do it, and potentially getting the right meeples in the right places. I sometimes don't have control over that. So I'm probably with Mark a bit. Not sure whether I'd want to try one of the other boards. It looks great, and I think the corruption is a nice touch because it is not a punishing corruption. I finished the game with 3 corruption, lost myself 9 points in the end, but my overall score was 200 and something, so it wasn't a big part of it, and there are ways to mitigate it.
Rating?
6.
Mark?
5.5.
Okay. Yeah, I think their comments are fair, and I would say I think it's not a game to play with heavy gamers. The people who like serious Euros where there's no luck involved, you probably do want to avoid it if that's your cup of tea generally. But in terms of just playing it for the fun of it, if you like, I do think it's an enjoyable game to play. They said the luck is an important factor. It's not massive, but it's there. And as long as you don't mind getting done in by other people's draws or just what happens to come out of the bag when you're pulling things out of the bag, then it should be fine. I've played all the different mini games, and I think they're all fun. They are quite different. The captain's the other one that I didn't show. You kind of spin a spinner and you're moving ships around on the board trying to get treasure. That one is really quite luck dependent in some ways. But they all, as I say, they feel really different. So you're getting a lot of variety each time you play one of the different roles. One serious negative to this, though, is the learning curve. It's incredibly steep. It's hard enough. There are 8 rule books that came with this game because of the expansions that come with it. Each of the separate roles has its own rule book, you see. So there's an awful lot of reading to be done that I've had to learn in terms of to teach other people how to play the game. And that wasn't much fun. Having played it a few times now, though, it's very straightforward to explain how to play it. And I do enjoy playing it. So it's not a sort of for heavy Euro gamers particularly, but if you just want kind of light fun in that sense, once you've got over the learning curve, it is an enjoyable game. I think I'll be on 7 out of 10. All right, thanks for watching. That was Merchant's Cove.